What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the Samsung Galaxy A01 to the new iPhone SE. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone even bother comparing these two phones? Well, there's a couple of reasons, I think. First off, these devices are the cheapest current 2020 phones from their respective companies. And second, in a world of 6-inch smartphones, both of these devices are smaller, compact, easy to handle phones, which I know is enticing to a lot of people. Now, honestly, aside from those couple similarities, everything else with these phones is vastly different, but I still wanted to make this video because I figured it might be helpful, and also it is kind of fun to make some ridiculous comparisons. So first off, let's actually talk about price, because we're really dealing with two completely different definitions of the word cheap. With the A01, this phone is the epitome of a budget device. It retails for right around $100 unlocked, and nowadays, I don't think there's much of an argument. That is a cheap budget phone for just about anyone. With the iPhone SE, while it is the cheapest current iPhone, it's still an Apple product after all. And at $399, it is nearly half the price of the next most expensive iPhone, but basically 4 times the price of the A01. It still takes a lot of money to get a new iPhone, and if you truly are on a budget, obviously the A01 will fit that guideline a lot better. And by the way, if you are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe you want to pick one of these devices up for yourself, I'll have links to these phones down below at their cheapest current prices, so check down there so you don't miss out. When it comes to their size, like I mentioned before, these phones are sort of in a league of their own, and side by side with one another, you actually get a pretty similar form factor. The 5.7-inch A01 is significantly smaller than every other A series and S series phone that Samsung offers this year. It's the only phone under 6 inches, and that pretty much means it's the only option if you're wanting a smaller device. The 2020 iPhone SE is technically dubbed a 4.7-inch device since that's the screen size, but throw in those extra bezels and it's closer to the form factor of a 5.5-inch phone. Again, across the rest of the iPhone lineup, you won't find anything smaller, and even though the iPhone 11 Pro is kind of close, it's $1,000, so not really what we're aiming for here. In the hand, things are a little more comfortable with the slightly smaller iPhone SE, but in general, both of these phones offer that easy one-handed experience that most other 2020 smartphones don't have. Physically, these phones are made from very different materials, and this stems from the fact that the devices themselves are sort of in different classes. The A01 is a true budget device. It's an all-plastic build with no metal anywhere. Now, fortunately, I think it still looks and feels pretty nice. It isn't a cheap plastic, it's a hard, high-quality matte finish with sort of like a metallic shine. And honestly, at this point, I really do think the days of like cheap plasticky phones are long over. Samsung does a nice job with the material across their entire A-series line. The iPhone, on the other hand, is an all-glass and aluminum build. It's the premium Apple materials you'd expect, and for the price, I don't think you can ask for anything less. Also, with the iPhone, the higher quality build yields 2 additional features the A01 does not have: wireless charging and an IP67 water-resistant rating. I guess you'll have to decide if either of those things are important to you, or if you need to have that premium build, but I don't necessarily think that this stuff is a real deciding factor. Now, obviously, we need to talk about these displays because I think it's probably the most noticeable difference with the phones. The 4.7-inch screen on the iPhone SE is sandwiched between easily the 2 biggest top and bottom bezels on any smartphone released probably in the last 3 years. It's the smartphone design that really traces its roots back to the original iPhone, but I guess more accurately the iPhone 6, and either way you look at it, this thing is dated to say the least. The A01 has a design that's on par with most smartphones from 2019 at least, and even 2020. Its 5.7-inch screen goes nearly corner to corner, but we get Samsung's V-shaped notch for the front camera at the top and a little bigger bezel down there at the bottom. The important thing to consider, of course, is just the fact that with the A01, you get as much screen real estate as possible in nearly the same form factor, while the iPhone SE has some wasted space. The main reason why the iPhone SE has those big bezels, of course, is because it still has the home button and touch Touch ID. Now, as far as the home button is concerned, this is something that people who buy this iPhone want to have. They're likely coming from the original SE or an iPhone 6, 7, or 8, so keeping the home button is likely important to them. It just unfortunately means this phone does not look like anything released this year. The other thing this iPhone keeps is Touch ID, of course, the fingerprint unlock. Interestingly enough, the A01 actually does not have a fingerprint reader at all, which I found kind of surprising. It has Face Unlock instead though, which is a feature the iPhone SE does not have. I do think Touch ID on the iPhone is faster and easier to use than Face Unlock on the A01, but if I have to sacrifice the design and screen size, I think it's a tough trade-off to make. In regards to the screen technology, you might be surprised to know that we're actually dealing with some pretty close specs. The A01 offers a 1520 by 720 resolution PLS TFT display, which is just Samsung's version of LCD. The iPhone SE has a 1334 by 750 resolution display, and it too is an LCD panel, though it's Apple's Retina setup. The A01 packs in about 301 pixels per inch, while the smaller, slightly higher resolution display on the iPhone SE crams in 326 pixels per inch. But specs aside, these are both pretty similar LCD displays. Now, personally, I do prefer the iPhone. It's sharper, it's more colorful, and seems quite a bit brighter too. That's the one I would go with if I had to choose. I think overall the viewing experience is better, and you get to see that if you have these phones side by side. But I think the thing that a lot of people have a problem with, myself included, is just the fact that Apple somehow gets away with this kind of screen on a $400 phone, while a lot of other devices at this price point have at least 1080p screens and more than likely AMOLED panels. With the $100 A01, it's fine, it makes sense, but with the iPhone SE, when you start to compare, I think that's where a ton of value is lost in choosing this device over others. When it comes to listening to your content, there's a couple points worth mentioning. First off, the A01 has a headphone jack, and the iPhone SE does not, so there's that to consider. Also, the speaker on the A01 is just one single one placed on the rear of the phone towards the bottom. It's mostly fine, but the placement is a little strange, and if you rest the phone on a table or accidentally cover it with your hand, the sound does get a little distorted. The iPhone has a dual stereo speaker setup. There's one at the bottom and one in the earpiece, and it's a great out loud listening experience. Definitely better than the A01. I'd much rather have a solid external speaker setup versus a headphone jack, but that's something you'll need to decide for yourself. Powering these two phones are two very different batteries, and I think this is actually a factor worth considering. The A01 packs a 3000 mAh capacity battery, which isn't massive, but compared to the 1821 mAh battery on the iPhone SE, it's a pretty big difference. In real-world use, I've been getting better battery life on the A01 by a few hours each day. Not that the iPhone's is bad necessarily, it's just good enough, while the A01's I think is quite a bit better. And when it comes to charging, the A01 comes with a 15-watt fast charger in the box, while the iPhone SE ships with just a 5-watt adapter. The iPhone supports 18-watt fast charging, but you need to buy the wall plug and cable separately. I already mentioned that the iPhone also has wireless charging, while the A01 does not, but I think all in all, the Samsung phone has the advantage with both batteries and charging. Now, the final two aspects of these phones that need to be compared are the internal specs and the cameras. And this is probably where things just get really unfair. The specs on the iPhone SE are actually flagship specs. Apple put their A13 Bionic chipset inside this phone, which is the same processor from the iPhone 11 Pro. And paired with 3GB of RAM, you're basically getting the same internals as a $1,000 flagship iPhone. This is where you're getting a ton of the value with the iPhone, even though you are still paying a good chunk of money. The A01, on the other hand, offers true budget specs. The Snapdragon 439 chipset, the Adreno 505 GPU, and 2 gigs of RAM. Now, I'm not going to pretend like it's even close. You know the iPhone is the more powerful device. It's faster, it offers a smoother experience, it's far better for gaming as well, and it's much better optimized. But here's the thing, the A01 still isn't bad. While it's not as fast as the iPhone, it's not slow by any means, and I genuinely don't believe people who choose this phone for $100 are expecting a powerhouse device that they can game on. It's supposed to be a phone that's mostly simple and easy to use and does the basics well, and that's what you get. The value in the iPhone is obvious. The specs with this phone are fantastic, but I actually do think there's still a lot of value in the A01 as well, since it is such an inexpensive phone. When it comes to the cameras, once again, I think we're comparing apples to oranges, unfortunately, but I'll explain what's going on anyway. The A01 has a dual camera setup around back, a 13 megapixel f2.2 aperture main lens, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor that helps with live focus shots. The iPhone actually has just the one lens, a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture shooter, but the iPhone is the significantly more capable picture and video taker in every capacity. Paired with the most powerful Apple chipset and highly optimized software, you can take pictures and videos on the iPhone SE that rival 2020 flagship devices. And you have a number of extra features like 4K video recording that the A01 does not have. The A01 still offers good enough pictures, but you can tell they were taken by a budget device. And this is the same story up front too. The 7 megapixel selfie camera on the iPhone SE technically isn't the best, but compared to the 5 megapixel shooter on the A01, the results speak for themselves. If I had to pick the two reasons to justify the price on the iPhone, it would definitely be the internal specs and the camera capabilities. That's pretty much what you're paying for, and you're getting features and specs that genuinely do rival Apple's $1,000 devices. But here's the thing, most everything else, like the screen, the size, the battery, the price, all that stuff falls in favor of the A01. So if I have to sum it all up, I think I'd put it like this. The A01 is probably the best overall value smartphone on the market right now. For $100, there's literally nothing wrong with the phone, and honestly, I'd say it's probably pretty good. The iPhone SE is the best value iPhone Apple has ever offered. You're paying a premium since it's Apple, but you're paying far less than anything else they sell. But the thing is, I think the iPhone SE is going to appeal to a smaller group of people than the A01 does. I think the A01 is just going to be considered by far more people. Because of that, I don't think these are competing phones, but it is still interesting to see what these two companies offer. So there you go. That's everything you need to know about the iPhone SE and the Samsung Galaxy A01. What do you guys think? Which phone is the better value? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.